In 80 and 84, the great powers of Europe gathered to divide a continent, while Britain and France fought for territory. One empire barely raised its voice. The Netherlands, once a titan of colonial trade, stood quietly on the sidelines as Africa was carved up. But their legacy runs deeper than you might think. The Dutch were early players in global empire. The 17th century Dutch East and West India companies controlled swaths of territory from Indonesia to the Caribbean, yes, parts of Africa. In fact, the Dutch were among the first Europeans to establish forts and trade posts along the West African coast. Elmina Castle in present-day Ghana. That was Dutch for over 200 years. But by the late 19th century, the Netherlands was no longer chasing colony. Politically cautious, militarily modest, and content with the riches of the East Indies, they watched as newer powers like Germany scrambled into Africa. At the Berlin Conference in 1884-85, the diplomatic heart of the scramble for Afkaba, Dutch sent a representative, but, unlike others, they claimed no new territory. Why? Partly because their empire was focused elsewhere, but also the Dutch had a different colonial model. They were traders first, and as long as the new powers didn't threaten Dutch shipping or investments, The Hague stayed quiet. Still, the Dutch weren't absent. Their influence in South Africa is profound. The Afrikaners, white settlers, who would go on to found the Boer republics were, descended from Dutch colonists. Though the Dutch officially gave up the Cape Colony to Britain in 1815, their cultural and political legacy shaped South African history for centuries. Be in West Africa, too, the Dutch left forts, trade routes, and conflict often with devastating local consequences. So while they didn't grab new colonies in 1885, the Netherlands' earlier presence still echoed loudly. Unlike the brutal extraction and forced labor systems of Belgium or Germany, the Dutch preferred indirect control, often working with local elites. But that doesn't mean it was benign. Enslavement, cultural disruption, and economic manipulation was central to Dutch strategy, especially in the 17th and 18th century. So, while the Dutch weren't painting the map in 1885, they'd already written part of the script. The Dutch didn't scramble for Africa, but they helped set the stage. An empire in decline, yes, but one whose legacy in Africa deserves more attention. Sometimes, the most forgotten players leave the quiet